Hi, everyone. Good morning. Nice to see you all. I'm Katie Couric. I'm a journalist, and I've also been very involved in the fight against cancer and an advocate in healthcare. I'm a founder of Stand Up to Cancer, which has become a significant force in cancer research. And I'd like to give the Milken Institute a huge thank you for giving us the opportunity to really dive into this huge and hugely important topic, getting our healthcare priorities in order, prevention, research, and treatment. In fact, Eric, you know, I'm going to ask you about technology and the role it could play in prevention, because I know that's really what you're focused on. But tell us what led you into the healthcare space. It was because your wife was diagnosed with breast cancer, and sort of what you observed that made you say, there's got to be a better way.
Yeah, I mean, the experience was maddening in that, you know, we had a series of technology companies, all based in Chicago, and I would say to people, we were giving, one of them is in the transportation space, and I would say we were giving truck drivers picking up pallets of water bottles, more technology than we were giving oncologists who were treating patients. And it's if you look at it, you know, cancer remains a data problem today. There are roughly 1.7 million people that get diagnosed each year in North America, and yet the largest database of molecular data, which is called the Cancer Genome Atlas, has under 20,000 exomes or genomes of data. So it's really, really tiny. If you look at that in any of the major subtypes that cause high mortality rates, like pancreatic cancer, it's maybe 150 patients. If you pick any two common mutations, we were talking a minute ago about these targeted genes or targeted mutations that are leading to disease. If you pick any two combinations in pancreatic cancer, the largest data set you have is 4, N of 4, meaning I could look at 4 patients and try to find a pattern. It's impossible. You can't find a pattern with those kind of small data sets. And so the journey for me was really, how do we bring technology to both clinical care and research? How do you build big data sets that people can actually look at in real time and navigate? And the challenge in the data sets that were being built is they were largely unidimensional. You had people building clinical data sets, you had people messing around with molecular data sets. People weren't trying to combine them both. And it's only when you combine them both, when you start to look at who's my patient from a phenotypic, perspective. Who are they? Are they a smoker? Are they, premenopausal? Who are they? What drugs are they taking? And what's their molecular composition? When you put all that together in mass, in very large quantities, you can begin to see patterns that historically were invisible. And those patterns are relevant for a treating physician, and they're relevant for research. And until we fix that fundamental problem, like basically build the infrastructure to collect data, I say to people all the time, it's akin to sending a great fisherman to the Atlantic Ocean with a very small fishing pole saying, let me know how many fish you catch. You might catch a fish, but you'll have an enormous amount of waste.
Why haven't we seen more technology in terms of early detection of disease? I know I got a virtual colonoscopy after getting a regular colonoscopy because I test all kinds of colonoscopies. But, why hasn't there been more? Because, again, if we really can nip a cancer in the bud or a lot of other diseases, if we detect it earlier, why, Eric, haven't we seen technology play a bigger role in screening, detection, blood tests, all kinds of things?
Yeah, I mean, we're just, the inherent challenge from a technological perspective is that the systems that physicians rely on, and I can only speak about cancer, I can't speak to any other of the disease types, but in cancer, the systems people rely on are older systems. They're not bad systems, but they were constructed 20, 30 years ago in terms of their core code base, and they're basically in silos. So in pathology, the systems you use might be different than your electronic health medical record system. And all these technologies are basically siloed, which means the process for a physician to basically treat a patient and analyze a particular medical condition is highly manual. We're at this unique moment in time where you have all these weird and massive technology paradigm shifts occurring at one time. You basically have genomic data that can now be collected at a fraction of the cost historically. It's a million-fold reduction in the cost of sequencing a patient over 12 years. So 12 years ago, what cost $1 million today costs $1. At the same time, you have all this really amazing imagery technology that's coming where you'll be able to look at scans and slides and look at anatomical data and basically map it. And when the cost of imaging comes down, when the cost of generating genomic data comes down, you can begin to imagine a technology platform that physicians can rely on in an inexpensive and affordable way to basically manage the early side of these diseases. If not, somebody has to pay that bill. And the inherent problem is the system is just not set up. As it is, you go to any NCI cancer center, and we work with dozens. These oncologists are seeing 40 patients a day. They can't handle another 40 or another 40, and they can't be asked to do 3 times as much with no tools.
What do you think about that, Eric, about sort of this promise of immunotherapy? I mean, some people say it's been overhyped. There was a piece in USA Today, I think Otis Brawley, the head of the American Cancer Society, said we're starting to believe our own bullshit, basically, was his quote, and talking about people spending their life savings on therapies that are kind of over-promising and under-delivering. So how do you look at immunotherapy and how data can bolster sort of the efficacy of immunotherapy?
I mean, so the first, I think, answer doesn't tell you much, is that both perspectives are totally true. So roughly 25 years ago, 510,000 people died a year in North America of cancer. It's about 600,000 last year. So with all the amazing progress we've made, mortality rates, especially for late-stage disease, metastatic disease, or certain just tricky types like liver cancer, pancreatic cancer, are almost untouched in the past quarter century. So that said, what we have seen recently with targeted oncotherapies, we mentioned one a minute ago with an ALK mutation, with immunotherapy are nothing short of amazing. I mean, we do some of the molecular analysis for a project at Duke, which got a bunch of attention. It was on 60 Minutes. It's basically analyzing GBMs and immunotherapy, and you see certain patients that, exactly like Jimmy Carter, should have not made it, that are alive and completely cancer-free. So we're starting to understand, I think, how you would actually bring precision medicine to the world of cancer. The inherent problem we're all facing, and it will get more frustrating before it gets less frustrating, is that we again have an infrastructure that doesn't honor technology, that doesn't honor data. And so you're about to now have incredible neoantigen peptides and vaccines and CRISPR technology and targeted oncotherapies and on and on and on, but trying to figure out who we should administer them to is going to be this broken kind of step in the chain. And that's what we have to fix first. It's very similar, by the way, to, like, if you think about when everyone on this panel grew up in a world where there were 3 television stations, and then somebody was laying cable one day in your house, and next thing you know, you turn around 25 years later and there's 500 TV stations. And that entire revolution in content was brought out by a technological, kind of a platform that got built. And if we don't build that in cancer, you're going to see an incredible disparity. The first wave of that disparity is going to be that the top NCI cancer centers, the academic institutions that can afford to kind of tackle that, are going to begin dispensing a quality of care that is demonstrably different than other places.
And Eric, are you worried about accessibility? Because, data, technology, that's usually for people who can afford it, right? So how do you ensure sort of this new paradigm for medical research, treatment, even prevention, that it crosses into all populations and not just the well-to-do?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just does. If you look at any technology paradigm shift, and we've had big companies in several, the internet, mobile, social, these things are like tsunamis. They're unavoidable. And they're virtually never led by the government. They're almost entirely private in orientation. And when they show up, when somebody builds something better and it creates value, then you'll see physicians adopt it, you'll see patients demand it, and it will just roll out. The bigger challenge, I think, that's been highlighted here is, this, from a data perspective, the system is just so broken, right? You say healthcare is complicated. Anything's complicated with no data. And we make it as hard as you could possibly make it. So one of the things that we do when we collect data from these big NCI cancer centers, we're focused on response and outcome data. It's very hard to get, but if you don't know what drug somebody took and how they responded, and you connect that to their molecular composition, you're just in the dark. And as we begin to amass that data, we think a lot about how are we going to send that data to insurance? How are we going to send that data to biotech and pharma? Because if you hold on to that data, everyone's trying to guess at what to do. I mean, payers would much rather, I'm sure, they'd like to pay as efficiently as they can. If something is going to reduce mortality rates and make people healthier, they want to fund it. And likewise, the last thing a pharma company would want to do is invest $2 billion in a drug that isn't going to work. But we all live in this complete void of data. I mean, in cancer alone, and this is probably unique, there is an enormous number of people, but in academic institutions, some statistics say as high as 70% of people, that are treated with a combinatorial therapy, an off-label drug, or a dose for which there's no NCCN guideline. Where's this data? I mean, if I were a pharma company, it's the first thing I'd want to know. How are people responding? We're just constantly asking people to just shoot in the dark, and then we're getting mad at them when the outcome isn't what we want or it's too expensive. And it is the end product of a system that just found itself with no data. If you actually take the time to kind of get all the information in one place and then disseminate it to all the stakeholders, I think you'll see costs become much more rational, therapeutics become far more effective, and just a different balanced system. And I think at this point, it's unavoidable.
Eric, I just wanted to ask you, I know I want your perspective, but is data really a panacea? Because data can only get you so far. I mean, cancer, I always say, is 1,000 different diseases and thousands of different biologies, right? So it can narrow your treatment, your course of treatment, and your options and your approaches. But it's not everything, is it?
Yeah, it really is. I wish it weren't. I mean, it really is. It's the first step. I mean, the data in and of itself can't treat a patient, so you can't give somebody zeros and ones and say you're cured. You just use data to figure out what to do. And figuring out what to do is the first step of precision medicine. And precision medicine is the only way we fight cancer. It's not 200 subtypes, it's 200,000 subtypes. It's multiple genetic combinations, both at a DNA level, at an RNA level, at a proteomic level, at an epigenetic level, at a microbiomic level. I mean, and understanding that and understanding that each patient is unique is the only way we make demonstrable progress in cancer, likely in diabetes, likely in neurological disorders, and so on and so forth. And you can't begin to unravel these algorithmic diseases without data. So the fact that we don't live in a world today that every insurance provider can look at every single drug everyone's been given over the last 5 years and how they responded is a tragedy. The fact that we ask biotech companies and pharmaceutical companies to basically go fishing and try to answer questions with very limited data sets is a tragedy. And the fact that we ask doctors to make decisions when there's a fork in the road, and there's often a fork in the road for 600,000 people that die a year of cancer, is a tragedy when they have no data. So the very first step is that. If we get that right, at least we're on the road to all the amazing things that I think this panel concurs are going to be coming, most of which will be in the biologies and chemistries. But the very first step is who am I dealing with, and how are they similar to everybody who came before?